Hello, YouTube. I don't normally do videos on here, but I particularly thought this time would be a good time to do one because I was at the gym earlier, still in my gym clothes, um, and the discussion that we had there touched upon something that I thought would be very important to speak out on, and that was the fact that the FBI made Joanne Chesimard, who we know as Assata Shakur, it put her on the top 10 most wanted terrorist list. And matter of fact, she was put up above Al Zawahiri, who is number two to Osama bin Laden in in Al Qaeda. So we were talking about what would prompt that. What would make it to where? What did she do rather to put her in the top 10 most wanted terrorist list with a bunch of people who have actually planned and done things against um, the United States. Now, yes, we had an FBI special agent get up and say that she killed a trooper execution style. But that right there in and of itself is a lie based upon the evidence and the trial transcripts um, that was brought up during that time. Matter of fact, the forensic evidence says it was impossible for her to have shot um, Forrester because, and that's the highway patrolman. It was impossible for her to have shot Forrester because it said that the angle in which the bullet entered and exited her body, or entered her body rather, was consistent with someone who had their hands raised at the time that they were shot. And yes, she was shot in both the stomach and then in the back that burst her clavicle, which they said at the time that the bullet like broke her clavicle, it made it impossible for her to uh, even fire a weapon. All right, now the things that we do know is this: during the time that that whole incident happened, there was a federal program ran by the Federal Bureau of Investigations called the Program, Counterintelligence Program, or COINTELPRO. And if any of you are serious about wanting to know about this case, that is a very imperative and important part, an important piece to look at. Look up the COINTELPRO program during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And you will see that certain people were targeted, and most honestly, Assata Shakur was one of them. She was actually dubbed by the FBI as the mother hen of the Black Liberation Army. Now, if you want to know a little bit about COINTELPRO, uh, the thing about that program, it was put in place to try to ensure the maintenance of the social and political climate and status of that day. Now, if you were a person that was black in particular, the social order of that day probably didn't work that well toward you because police brutality was was ridiculous around that time. Yes, we have some now, but then, according to the stats or whatever, it was ridiculous back then, especially if you were a minority, particularly a black person. So, anybody that was coming up through the ranks at the time that they perceived as a charismatic figure, someone who could draw people in, especially black people, to upset that social order of that day, well, they honed in and they targeted you and tried to either discredit you, um, they intimidated and even assassinated people. It is well documented that they bugged and followed Martin Luther King uh, for most of his public life. And it is also said that around the time of his assassination that they had a hand in it because they could have stopped it, but they didn't. They had a hand in his assassination. Also, it is said that there were tensions between the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X was actually ratcheted up by the FBI, causing Malcolm X to be assassinated. It is known for a fact that the FBI gave the Chicago Police Department the green light to go in at 4 in the morning. Back in 1969, 4 in the morning to go in and kill a 21 and a 22-year-old member of the Black Panther Party. One of them was called Fred Hampton. He was the 21-year-old. He was shot. Over 40 shots went through his bedroom door while he slept and killed him. And in that same night, Mark Clark was killed. Okay? So, I mean, that was government targeted assassinations. And so, who else was on the list? Joanne Chesimard, aka Assata Shakur, she was on the list. Why? Because she was considered an influential figure of the Black Liberation Army. Matter of fact, they called her the Mother Hen. They tried to pin robberies on her. They tried to pin kidnappings on her. Some of the time that they pinned it on her, she was nowhere in the vicinity. A few of them, she was charged while she was incarcerated. Okay? Because that's how much of a threat they thought she was to disrupting the social order by demanding equal rights for black people. So then it comes down to that night, that fateful night on May 2nd, 1973, where Assata Shakur, along with Zaid Malik Shakur and Sundiata Acoli, are driving in their car. And Harper starts following them. And he says, in one instance, he says they were driving slightly above the speed limit. In the other instance, it was saying that there was something wrong with the tail light. But at any case, he stopped them. And then after he stopped him, then he asked for the license of the driver. And Zaid Shakur, he had him come to the back of the vehicle. Okay, and having him come into the back of a vehicle, after that everybody agreed with that. After that, that is where the story picks up and gets interesting. Okay, because it is at that point that the shooting starts taking place. Okay, when it starts taking place, of course, at the end of all of this fiasco and this incident, you have two people dead. Zaid Malik Shakur and Officer Forster. You have those two people dead, and you have two people who it reported then that were shot, which was Officer Harper and also Assata Shakur. Now, according to the forensic evidence, Assata Shakur had her hands up at the time that she got shot, based upon the way the bullet entered her body. She got shot in the stomach and in the back. Okay? Also, according to that same forensic evidence, there is no way she could have lifted a weapon to fire any shots at anybody. Matter of fact, when her hands were examined, there was no gunpowder on her hands or no indication at all that she had handled a firearm. So how is it 40 years later you have an FBI agent stand in front of the American people and say that Assata Shakur shot a member of law enforcement execution style. That's not the truth. According to the evidence, that is not the truth. But if we just take their word for it and we never go and look at the court's transcript or the evidence that they had at the time, we would not know that. We wouldn't know that whatsoever. So I encourage you to go and look at the evidence. Because right now it seems like what they're doing is just trying to complete unfinished business from the COINTELPRO program. And if that is what is being done, then none of us are safe. If you have a different opinion, that all of a sudden you come out and you say, hey, I'm letting you know I feel that the government is wrong on this and that we should fight against that, then you will be targeted too. One of my colleagues I was talking to, they were talking about before talking about guns. We were having a discussion on guns, gun rights, and gun laws, and they were saying that the reason why they want to fight so hard for gun rights and the gun laws is because they should be able to own an AR-15, AK-47, just in case if ever the government should abuse its authority and they have to defend themselves. And I said, based upon that right there, you should be in Assata Shakur's corner, because that is what she did. At a time when the government was abusing its power, even the church committee from the Church Hearing Committee in the 1970s said that the government abused its power with the COINTEL program. And it was under that pretext that she was defending herself, because she was a specific target of that program. Now, any of you, I challenge anybody that sees this video, if you can go and show me the evidence where she shot anybody, specifically Forrester. If you can show from that court case that she shot him, then please let me know, and I'll recant what I just said. Okay? But if you show me, or if you're able to even show me anything of the sort, then okay, she murdered that guy. But I'm going to tell you ain't going to be able to find it. But if you do, then I will say, all right, I will acquiesce and say she murdered that Forrester. But even if that happened, then I want you to make the case of how she is the most dangerous terrorist to America, or she's in the top 10 most dangerous terrorists to America. Show me anything in the last 40 years that she's done to show that America is in trouble by her being in Cuba or by her being alive. Otherwise, you need to get out here and voice your opinion too. Okay? Because America should not be targeting a 66-year-old citizen who's living in exile in Cuba. So once again, I challenge you. Anybody. Show me the evidence. You tell me what makes her a very dangerous domestic terrorist. But if not, I challenge you and I admonish you as an American. Doesn't matter your color, as an American, to speak out for this, your fellow American. Otherwise, if it should ever happen to you, you should just be quiet and go through it. This is all I have for now, my commentary. Tell me what you think. Be glad to hear it. But like I said, this is my thoughts on the situation, and this right here is Wink Thinks. Glad you could join us. Have a wonderful day.